Good evening, Warriors! Back with another episode of Vigor Warriors 2 and the 1% Club. Hope you guys are doing well this evening. Hope you guys are on your purpose, continuing to conquest, continuing to improve yourself as a masculine male, and continuing to be able to conquest, not only control yourself, but control things around you. So, we're going to talk about a topic by the Rising King, how to handle release. And this is going to go into a little bit of a couple comments that I saw today. Viable and I think it was Egg Emmons kind of had a discussion talking about, I think the question was directed to me at first, talking about the whether or not a person has an idol, whether it's Hindu, Buddha, whatever it might be, Christian, and whether or not that teaching or religion, 5,000 years, I'm somehow saying that it's not, it's false and things like that. What I'm saying, my friends, and this is something that I think that, once again, it's my opinion. It's something that I've, over the years, have developed an opinion on. And obviously you can kind of take it the way you want to, Warriors, as I'm talking about this. But what I'm really saying is this, and you can look at anything you're doing. Anything you're doing, the object itself is not where the meaning comes into it. It's a symbol. I don't care if it's a cross. I don't care if it's a Quran. I don't care what you're looking at. Yes, it plays a role, but just like anything else, semen retention by itself is not going to be successful. You're not going to be successful with just semen retention. Why is that? Well, they always say that you can go through the motions, but unless you put the spirit of it into it, and they're using the word spirit, then all of a sudden you're not going to get the benefit out of it. And what I've learned over 60 some years is that the flesh is the flesh. And behind the flesh is a soul and a spirit. So I don't care which religion, what God, what creator you're with, and that's your choice. And I'm certainly not going to judge you and say one is real and one's false. But what I'm going to say to you is that, in my opinion, if you don't have that spiritual nature behind what you're looking at or what you're going to and worshiping, then you're not going to be as effective, especially when it comes to semen retention. And that's my opinion. And I think the bottom line really is that you have to make an effort to kind of see that there's more to the flesh than it appears. Because we live in a world right now that's controlled by all of this, and they call it, whether they call it liberalism, whether they call it Moderna, whatever they might call it. These type of things where people look at life in a different way. They're trying to break down all the old traditions. Now, we're in a post era where I think it's coming back. And the reason it's coming back is people realize that they have to have something to have hope in, have to have something that's going to keep them strong. And the bottom line really is nothing physical in this world is going to do that to you. I don't care if it's a car. I don't care if you're holding money in your hand. And so what I'm really saying is that the objects itself, no matter what object you're talking about, and no matter what you end up doing, by itself is not going to be your saving grace. It's not going to help you. What's going to help you is your relationship to your God. And that comes nothing physical. That's a spiritual thing. I don't care what religion you're talking about. That's a spiritual type of thing. And in that sense, then you have to kind of focus on that. So when we talk about this idea of semen retention, once again, the Rising King brings a good point. What happens? What can you do when you release? Well, again, if you build your foundation just on semen retention, and I had that problem for many years, and all you're doing is talking about semen retention, well, you might be lucky. You might be able to do it for a week or two, or you might be able to do it for 2 days, and then all of a sudden you can't control it. Where does that control come from? Well, the self-control starts coming from your relationship beyond semen retention. Exercise is great, but again, the energy The spirit you put into it focuses on whether you get true benefits or not. And what I'm saying with it comes to semen retention, you have to kind of consider what the real purpose of retention is. Yes, it starts off as being something that, you're not watching pornography, you're not going to go chasing women around, and all that is great. But the bottom line, as I'm trying to do over the next number of years, is trying to get closer to God. And that's a spiritual thing. It's got very little to do with the physical thing we see. That's why the Bible and other people have always said, there's two worlds here. Yes, we're living in the present world where you have objects and things that you go to for masses, and you go to mosque, you go different types of things that you're going to go ahead and worship to. But the bottom line really is you are really kind of connecting with a God. You might be doing it through that object or that process, whether it's brahmacharya, sophism, whatever we're talking about. But that process by itself is not going to lead you to be an effective type person. What's going to lead you to that is having a foundation beyond that. And that's not a physical foundation. That is a spiritual. Now again, if you don't believe in that, and I didn't for a while, that's where my problems really began. Because if you don't believe there's a spiritual aspect to life, and all you believe in what you're seeing, then you're going to struggle with anything that seems like it's out of the world. It seems like it's kind of science fiction, outer space. Because in reality, if you can't describe it or see it, you're going to say, look, it's not there. And that's kind of what we call Madura. Over the last 200-300 years, we've been caught in this system in which people are focusing so much on science. And I used to be a person who did a lot of research, so I know how those things go. It's interpretation. You're using data, you're still interpreting. You're still looking at those things from a perspective. It's all perspective. So to kind of put everything into something you see physically, I'm learning over the years that that's not really what you're seeing. You're seeing what you want to see sometimes, but the bottom line really comes down to the fact that there's a whole different world that we're not seeing. And that's what it comes down to. You either believe in your God or you don't. Or you believe you're God and you can control anything you want to control. And that's kind of where we come down to releasing and how you look at this. If you're releasing and that happens to you, what you've got to do is kind of build that strong foundation back with your God. In my case, it's Jesus Christ. You have to go ahead and say, okay, Jesus, I'm sorry this happened. I'm going to continue to go back and pray, meditate, those type of things, again, to establish a relationship with your Creator, your God. That's the key. And I don't care what religion you study. I don't care what you're doing. You can argue about religion all you want. But in my estimation, it doesn't come down to the physical types of arguments people make. Each person has a relationship to their Creator that's different. Yours is different than mine. Mine is different than somebody else's. The bottom line really is, however, that relationship is crucial, in my estimation, for you as you go on, whether you're going to control yourself, you're going to serve God's purpose, all those type of things. So when we talk about this, I think it's a very interesting question, and I appreciate Viba and Examens and other people bringing this issue up. It is important. I think certainly what you believe in is and I have no point to judge anybody on what they believe in. But I think the key is going to be, in any kind of religion you believe in, is that are you just going to go ahead and walk through the motions, or are you really believing in that Creator, that God, that person, that creation that puts you here? And I see a lot of people, whether it's Catholic or Christian or anything, they go to church every Sunday, but they go home and they're the farthest thing away from believing. They don't believe at all. And they'll tell you that. It's not something that I would do. They'll tell you they don't believe. They're going to church for a whole different reason. And I guess that's the thing that you need to kind of focus on here. Warriors, as you go through things, what is your true relationship with your Creator? And that's going to help you through this type of thing. If you're releasing and you're at the point where you're trying to stop this, then it's time to pray. It's time to go back. And it's time to focus on what are you really what's your relationship with your God? Your God will help you through these tough times. Your God will give you that strength, that power. But that comes through that spiritual connection you have. I believe that God is a co-creator with you. And certain things, God's given you that ability to do that. And I think that's the key to it. So I think when we go back down to the bottom line here, we're talking about you're living in a spiritual world, though many people don't realize that. People think they're just living in the physical world. And that's why people have trouble, whether it's losing weight, stopping an addiction here and there. They have to call to a higher power. But if they don't believe in a higher power, and they believe all they have is this material stuff that they're around, they're going to struggle. And so when you look at this, I think the key is going to be to focus on this. Now, this is not an easy thing. I think Rob said this too in one of the comments that I saw. Of course it's not easy. It's the hardest thing in the world for men, especially for men, because we're so visually oriented. We look at things from a visual standpoint. And so on our estimation, we're visual. And therefore we see things, we think, well, that's correct, or we want that. And in a sense, most of that stuff is an illusion, in my opinion. We live in a world of illusions. And the key is to be smart enough to be able to realize and have self-control enough to not caught up in that illusion. And so as a person is releasing, the way to handle that, to answer the question that Rising King had again, is that you pray, you meditate, you go back to the relationship you had with your God. And you start again. This is a lifestyle change. This is not something that you're going to be doing for 1 week and that's it. Because it's not a physical thing you're doing here. Yes, you're doing retention. You're not having sex. Yes, you're doing those physical things. Just like you would with anything else you're doing. But what you're really doing down deep is you're changing everything about you. And what you're doing is connecting with a higher power. And that's got nothing to do with the physical. That is more of the spiritual. And that's something that all of us at some point have to come to grips with. You're either going to believe that or not. If you don't believe that, well, that's your choice. And I'm certainly not one to judge anybody on any of their choices. Because Warriors, my big reason is for doing this is to kind of get the information out, at least from my perspective. And you can take it for what it's worth. But I will tell you that in my situation, the spiritual aspect has really kind of shown through over the last 3 or 4 years a lot more than the physical. And I've begun to realize that the world I thought I was living in is not the world that we really live in. It's told to us by certain things, the matrix that we're sitting there for certain reasons, but in the long run, what we're talking about is not what we see in front of us, but what we don't see. And that's something we have to kind of look at. All right, my friends, well, enough of this. Great discussion here. Thanks, Rising King, for that. I appreciate that. And once again, do not lose heart. Do not be discouraged, Warriors. If you release, those things happen. It's part of life. It's part of the situation of learning how to do this. Again, what I say to you is, again, Warriors, focus on the spiritual relationship you have with your God, your Creator. I don't care what religion you're in. Focus on that thing and realize that the key is building that relationship. And the more you build that relationship, the less you're going to worry about all these other physical types of things around you. And you're not going to bother with trying to get with a woman or watch porn, all that kind of stuff. Because the bottom line is you're trying to satisfy, you're trying to work with that God that you have. All right, my friends, enough for today. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening. And remember 2 things, my friends. Every day is a new day to a great warrior. And guys, remember, the call is on, the clarion call